Good evening, Prof. Thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate it. In a time of a pandemic, does politics take a back seat?
Well, politics shouldn't take a back seat, but the nature of politics should change. And it should change away from an adversarial contest and jockeying for support towards parties bringing their support and constituencies into an agenda that can best deal with the pandemic that's facing the country. So it's time to change the way one acts as a political party for the common good, for the national good, rather than party political good.
And what have you seen? And it's interesting that you say exactly that, because we've just had a clip from the Health Minister where he's spoken about we've got to move beyond our differences and all work together. Are you seeing that working together, that cohesion that is needed amongst the various political parties to get through this pandemic?
Unfortunately not. The pandemic has been sucked into the politics and has fueled the politics in terms of the various agendas and objectives of parties that are contesting for power, especially in the build-up to very important municipal elections next year. So unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And all the parties are doing it in different ways, culminating in mixed messages and missing the key issues that need to be dealt with.
You say in your article that the pandemic has exposed the flaws in the ANC, but just to be fair, our government has been battling with a completely new virus, and some of the mistakes they've made, we've certainly seen real problems with the thinking behind some of the regulations and the way that they've implemented them, but so have other countries. So on balance, how has the ANC done in your view?
They started off well. And I do accept that at the beginning we didn't have a lot of information, so we had to act in terms of the precautionary principle, which means that you plan for the worst and hope for the best. As more information became available, that flexibility and fluidity wasn't exhibited. In fact, we started to see a hardening of attitude in terms of defending various aspects of the lockdown, which seemed no longer to be appropriate in terms of warm chicken and other such issues. And that just distracted from the key efforts in terms of getting a message across clearly, simply, to get people to change their behavior. And I think that as lockdown proceeded, that ambiguity started to replace the clarity of the initial position. So some of it is understandable. Other parts of it, I think, are because of political mismanagement.
And what is the role of an opposition party at a time like this? Because while there needs to be unity, you still need to be that critical voice, sort of highlighting issues and concerns. And bearing that in mind, how have the EFF and the DA done?
I don't think they've done well at all. I think that in many ways, both of those opposition parties are caught up in their own internal politics. So the DA's got a major election contest coming up, and unfortunately, a lot of the messaging and the public engagement has been around candidates jockeying for position in terms of their own internal processes. And that's deflected away from bringing support into a process to deal with the pandemic. And you see the difference between the interim leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, compared to the conduct of the DA Premier in the Western Cape, Alan Winde. A very different style, a very different way of engaging. And I think in a pandemic, Alan Winde got it right, in contrast to the interim leader who's campaigning for an election. And that deflects from what needs to be done. The EFF, on the other hand, have been remarkably quiet. Apart from that one press conference to perhaps deflect away from the VBS scandal that's flaring in the country. So we're not quite sure what's going on there, but demanding that alcohol be banned, that cigarettes be banned, it just doesn't seem to fit in with what really needs to be done in terms of people changing their behavior, in terms of hand washing, social distancing, all those basic things to limit the spread of the pandemic. So complete deflection away from what needs to be done in both cases.
And of course, as you mentioned, we are heading for local government elections next year, unless of course they are postponed, as the ANC is suggesting. But if it goes ahead, do you think that political messaging needs to change, will be changed forever because of this pandemic that we are living through?
I don't think it'll be changed forever. I think it will be different. And I think the messaging will accommodate some of the issues that have come out of the pandemic, but get sucked into the policy agendas and the principles that inform the political parties. So you'll see a transformation of some COVID-19 issues into the platforms of the various parties. But I don't think we're going to see a radically different politics. I think that in South Africa, the fault line are pretty clear, and that will be the basis that will differentiate the parties from each other, and they'll use or cherry pick information from the COVID pandemic to feed into their pre-existing platforms. So no dramatic change expected there, and maybe a lost opportunity as well.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views this evening. Political philosopher, political analyst, Professor Ivor Sarakinsky.